It was no secret that the Haganah had been smuggling arms into the country ever since 1929. On October the 16th in 1935, in a consignment of cement from the Belgian cargo ship Leopold II, which were destined for a Jewish merchant, a large cache of smuggled weapons comprising 25 machine guns, 800 rifles and 400,000 rounds of ammunition were found. At the end of October, in response to the storm of public controversy over the arms shipment, Sheikh Is ad-Din al-Qassam, a reformist preacher, leader of the Black Hand, an anti-Zionist and anti-British militant organization, approached his followers with a proposal to take up arms. Later, he became the namesake of the armed arm of Hamas. Only a few weeks later, Qassam was killed. His funeral in Haifa became a major nationalist demonstration, and he was subsequently regarded as a nationalist cult hero and became an inspiration to diverse Palestinian nationalist groups, not least during the ensuing Great Revolt, which his death helped to spark 6 months later. On the 25th of April 1936, the Arab Higher Committee was founded and endorsed a general strike, calling for an end to Jewish immigration, the prohibition of the transfer of Arab land to Jews, and the establishment of a national government responsible to a representative council. Later, it called for no taxation without representation. The beginning, the revolt was focused mainly on strikes and other forms of political protest in order to secure a political result. By October 1936, this phase had been defeated by the British civil administration using a combination of political concessions, international diplomacy, and the threat of martial law. In November 1936, and with the prospects of war in Europe increasing, the British government set up the Peel Royal Commission to investigate the causes of the disturbances. The strike had been called off in October, and the violence abated for about a year while the Peel Commission deliberated. The Commission reported in July 1937 and recommended the partition of Palestine into Jewish and Arab states. The report stated that if partition is to be effective in promoting a final settlement, it must mean more than drawing a frontier and establishing two states. Sooner or later, there should be a transfer of land and, as far as possible, an exchange of population. The population exchange, if carried out, would have involved the transfer of up to 225,000 Arabs and only 1,250 Jews. Indignation was widespread, with Arabs complaining that the plan had allotted to them the barren mountains, while the Jews would receive most of the 5 cultivable plains. For the Arabs, the plan envisaged giving Zionists the best land, with 82% of Palestine's principal export, citrus fruit, consigned to Jewish control. The Arab Higher Committee opposed the idea of a Jewish state and called for an independent state of Palestine, with protection of all legitimate Jewish and other minority rights and safeguarding of reasonable British interests. They also demanded cessation of all Jewish immigration and land purchase. They argued that the creation of a Jewish state and lack of independent Palestine was a betrayal of the word given by Britain. On the 20th of August 1937, the 20th Zionist Congress in Zurich expressed that, at the time of the Balfour Declaration, it was understood that the Jewish national home was to be established in the whole of historic Palestine, and that inherent in the declaration was the possibility of the evolution of Palestine into a Jewish state. The Congress decided to reject the specific borders recommended by the Peel Commission, but empowered its executive to negotiate a more favorable plan for a Jewish state in Palestine. Following the report's publication, the British government released a statement of policy, agreeing with its conclusions and proposing to seek from the League of Nations authority to proceed with the plan of partition. In March 1938, the British appointed the Woodhead Commission to examine the Peel Commission plan in detail and to recommend an actual partition plan. The first phase of the revolt had seen seen the general strike and guerrilla tactics, which left about 1,000 Palestinians and 73 Jews dead. As early as May 1936, the British had formed armed Jewish units equipped with armored vehicles to serve as auxiliary police and had developed practices of house searches without warrants, night raids, preventive detention, caning, flogging, deportation, confiscation of property, and torture. By the end of September 1937, the revolt started anew with the killing of the District Commissioner of the Galilee, Louis Andrews. Days later, the British dissolved all Palestinian political organizations, deported 5 leaders, and established military courts against rebellion by Palestinians. All frontiers with Palestine were closed, telephone connections to neighboring countries were withdrawn, press censorship was introduced, and a special concentration camp was opened near Acre. In November 1937, the Irgun embarked on a series of indiscriminate attacks against Arab civilians as a form of what the group called active defense against Arab attacks on Jewish civilians. In July 1938, when the Palestine government seemed to have largely lost control of the situation, the garrison was strengthened from Egypt, and in September it was further reinforced from England. By the end of the year, order had been restored in the towns, but guerrilla tactics continued in rural areas until the outbreak of the Second World War. At that stage, I have to make a personal statement. The so-called Arab Revolt was indeed a war against the colonized by the British Army, with a centuries-long tradition of oppressing the inhabitants of colonized countries with utmost brutality. The assisting Zionist irregular forces learned literally everything that followed in the decades until present, and what was only militarily modernized by the Israeli Defense Forces, which evolved out of the diverse Zionist terrorist organizations trained by the British. To understand that, I advise you to read the related Wikipedia article. However, let's continue. Towards the end of the Civil War, in June and August 1939, a change in relations between Zionists and their British sponsors happened, as Irgun bombs killed 3 British officers. In the meantime, from April to early August 1938, the 4-person Woodhead Commission conducted its investigations into the details of the partition. Woodhead was secretly advised that it was within the Commission's authority to decide that no workable scheme could be produced. The Commission rejected the Peer Commission's plan mainly on the grounds that it required a large transfer of Arabs. The Commission found that a self-supporting Arab state could only be established if it contained a large number of Jews, whose contributions to tax revenue would alone enable that state to balance its budget. In their report, they examined 3 possible modifications of the Peer Commission proposal without asking the Arab Palestinians, which they called Plans A, B, and C. We have to understand that all citizens of the British colony were called Palestinians at that time. They were distinguished as being Jews or Arabs, as being of all other religions taken together. Under Plan A, it was estimated that the Arab state would have 7,200 Jews and 485,200 Arabs, and the Jewish state would have 304,900 Jews and 294,700 Arabs. Under Plan B, the Jewish state would have 300,400 Jews and 188,400 Arabs, while 90,000 Arabs and 76,000 Jews would continue to live under British rule. Under Plan C, the Jewish state's initial population would be about 226,000 Jews and 54,400 Arabs. The Arab state would have an initial population of 8,900 Jews and 444,100 Arabs. This plan was preferred by the Commission. The Commission published its conclusions on November 9, 1938, after which the British government rejected the imminent partition of Palestine and called for a conference in London for all relevant parties to work out a compromise. The so-called St. James Conference, the recommendations of the British government were eventually rejected by both Jews and Arabs. That same year, Zionist leader Jabotinsky wrote, "The Arab Arabs must make room for the Jews in Eretz Israel. If it was possible to transfer the Baltic peoples, it is also possible to move the Palestinian Arabs. And then, on September the 1st, the same year, millions of German soldiers under the leadership of Adolf Hitler, who admired Britain for its empire, started to conquer their own empire of Lebensraum im Osten. Again, all hell broke loose.